Now, this is just going to be a quick video recapping and discussing some of the Star Wars info that's come out of San Diego Comic-Con, and pretty much all of it is in regards to the other sources of canon, because nothing major is likely going to be announced or unveiled until next month at D23, which is Disney's big exclusive convention. Anyway, it seems like we've now got the full slate of publications or books and comics that will be a part of the Journey to the Rise of Skywalker, which is the same name or tagline they've used for both previous saga films and the build-up campaigns around them. Though in both previous cases, none of what we got really amounted to much in terms of relevancy to the movies, and I'll get to more on that in a moment. Before I do though, let's just take a quick look at the three biggest titles coming and do a small bit of speculating. First, we have the novel Resistance Reborn, which we've been told, and it's basically all we've been told at this point, that it'll take place between the events of episodes 8 and 9. And when we take a look at the characters on the cover, and they are Rey, Poe, Finn, and Leia, and then factor in the name, it seems pretty obvious what we're going to get here. And that is a story about trying to regrow the Resistance after the events of The Last Jedi, where they were down to about a dozen people aboard the Millennium Falcon. In other words, this book will explain why, when Episode 9 starts, the Resistance has grown to some sort of significant size again, which really makes one wonder what was the point of pushing them so close to the brink of annihilation in the previous movie. I guess that's why they were all smiles at the end of the film. They knew being down to just a dozen people was only a minor setback in their fight against the First Order, a regime that managed to defeat the New Republic and conquer the galaxy, or reign, in only a matter of days. And as far as we know, where only one really big shot was fired to accomplish all of that, but I digress. Next up, we have a 4-part comic series called Allegiance, which we've also only been told will take place between the events of episodes 8 and 9. And from the name this time, we can infer this will be about recruiting the allies from the Outer Rim that failed to show up at the end of The Last Jedi, ones that apparently have some sort of allegiance to Leia, I'd imagine. So again, this will be a comic that explains how the Resistance will be back in some sort of force in the next movie. Last, but certainly not least, in fact it's the one I'm by far most excited for, is a 4-part comic series called The Rise of Kylo Ren, which apparently picks up after the events of the incident with Luke in the hut one fateful night, and will explain the origins of the Knights of Ren. And the description I read makes it sound like they are indeed the students of Luke that turned and helped kill the others, as has been speculated since The Last Jedi came out. Though something tells me that wasn't the original plan for them, and instead they were going to be the next evolution of the Acolytes of the Beyond, a group of non-Force sensitive beings who were fascinated with old Sith artifacts and seemed to be obsessed with one Sith in particular, that being Darth Vader. And it was thanks to their story, given to us in the Aftermath series of books, which was a part of the Journey to the Force Awakens, where we learned Sith artifacts, primarily masks it seems, can hold some sort of residual dark side energy and can imbue someone wearing it with that power, or even possess them with the spirit of an ancient Sith Lord, which may still end up being relevant in The Rise of Skywalker and be a part of how Palpatine wishes to return. And so again here, I think it also means the original plan for the Knights of Ren was for them to be a group that, like Kylo Ren himself, worshipped Darth Vader and wore ancient Sith gear and fought in his name. And they followed Kylo because, well, he was Vader's grandson. But that idea was way too cool for Rian Johnson to explore in his movie, and as he himself has said, the reason why the Knights of Ren don't appear in The Last Jedi is because he felt like he just had no place for them. So now it looks like they're going to be Luke's fallen students, and I do hope this comic provides a hell of a reason why half of Luke's students betrayed him and joined Kylo Ren. God, they really made Luke fail on so many different levels, didn't they? Anyway, I do hope all these stories end up being relevant to the coming movie, and I really think they will be in this case. Hell, I think the novel and comic series about the Resistance will be borderline required reading if you want to fully understand how the Resistance is back in The Rise of Skywalker. And that will be in sharp contrast to the Journey to the Force Awakens and the one to The Last Jedi, both of which ended up being almost completely irrelevant to the movies. Though, as I said moments ago, it did seem like Aftermath was alluding to an origin for the Knights of Ren that just got scrapped. Which, as I've been talking about a lot lately, is a shame. It's a shame the other sources of canon, especially in regards to the sequel trilogy it seems, haven't found a way to tie into the films in a more meaningful way, without being required reading to understand them, of course. Which has a lot to do, I feel at least, with not mapping out a broad outline for the whole trilogy in advance, so that you could plant some small seeds in these books and comics that would later come to fruition in the films, again like the origins of the Knights of Ren. Though that's not to say all the other sources of canon have been bad or useless or meaningless. Mainly, it's just the stuff around the sequel trilogy and anything set between episodes 4 and 5, and there's been a lot of that, which just has this sense of disconnect from the films and has been mostly useless. One example, though, of something that has been good and has connected to the bigger story, and in a meaningful way, is the second volume of the Darth Vader comic series by Charles Soule, the same guy who is writing the new comic about Kylo and the Knights of Ren, which is why I have high hopes for that. Anyway, his 25-issue Vader run picked up right after the events of Revenge of the Sith, and showed us everything from how Vader made his first red lightsaber, to the formation of the Inquisitors, to what his relationship with Palpatine was like. It even introduced a new Sith, that being Lord Momin, and the run wrapped up by implying that Anakin was a creation of Palpatine, which may or may not have something to do with Palpatine's plan to return in the upcoming movie. Compare that then to the 4-part comic series Shattered Empire, which picked up right after the events of Return of the Jedi and was a part of the Journey to the Force Awakens. And in that series, we got to see Luke, along with Poe Dameron's mother, rescue 2 tree saplings, which isn't quite as lame as it initially sounds when we learn they were saplings from the Force tree that used to grow at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. But still, it's not the most exciting story, and nothing more has been done with those trees since, other than to imply that maybe one of them is responsible for Poe's incredible piloting skills, since Luke gave one of the saplings to Poe's mother, and it was planted on Yavin where Poe grew up. So maybe growing up in the proximity of a Force tree made Poe an incredible pilot, who knows. Though I suppose that comic series and the Aftermath series were better than what The Journey to the Last Jedi gave us, which was a novel about Canto Bight that was utterly irrelevant, a comic series about how Phasma got out of the trash compactor on Starkiller Base and covered up her treasonous act of lowering the shields. And it also gave us a book about her origin, which, though it was actually a fantastic book, it had nothing to do with the movie. In fact, 2 of the Journey to the Last Jedi stories had to do with Phasma, who of course just came back from the dead to promptly die again. In closing here, I do think this new novel coming and the 2 new comic series will be relevant to the rise of Skywalker, or maybe even required reading for anyone who wants to fully understand the story of what's going on in the movie. Though I'm sure, or at least I hope, the film itself will do a good enough job of quickly explaining how the Resistance recovered after where they left off in The Last Jedi. And really, this is what the other sources of canon connected to these movies should have been doing from the very start, finding a way to be relevant and somewhat important without being absolutely required to understand the movie. As I've said before, they need to walk that fine line between required and relevant in order to make these other stories truly worth reading. And though I don't know how excited I am to learn how the Resistance rebuilt itself, I am excited to know more about the Knights of Ren, especially if Charles Soule is the one telling me about it. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me if you're excited for any of these new The Rise of Skywalker titles, or what your stance is on the other sources of canon. How close to required reading should they come? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.